Most people in the energy industry regard non-fossil fuel energy sources as supplemental, not as an alternative. That's because even though their development is expanding fast, they currently provide less than 1% of overall energy consumption. Richard Jones is Deputy Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. He spoke recently at the Baker Institute at Rice University in Houston, Texas.
Modern renewable energy technologies grow. In fact, they see the fastest rate of increase. But their share of total energy use is so small today that even by 2030, they're only taking about 2%.
Austin, the capital of Texas, is one place where renewables are having a much larger impact. This fast-growing city gets about 1/10 of its electrical power from wind turbines in the western part of the state. Roger Duncan is general manager of the electrical utility Austin Energy.
We get somewhere between 10 to 12% of our energy from renewable energy and the remainder from that coal, nuclear, and gas. We have plans going forward to get 30% of our energy from renewables by the year 2020.
So most power generation here will depend on fossil fuels for decades to come. But Duncan says change is coming.
Fossil fuels are cheap today but rising in cost, and we expect them to rise further in the future because of carbon constraints. Some of the renewables today are very expensive but are dropping in cost, and we expect in a few years or at least a decade or at least for them to drop substantially in costs.
U.S. government subsidies offset the true cost of all energy sources, but based on the energy produced, those subsidies are far higher for renewables than they are for oil, gas, and coal. Baker Institute energy economist Ken Medlock says the public needs to understand that development of alternative energy through government programs is not free.
It's going to cost something to do this. And at the end of the day, if you push too hard, the cost only rises. And who ends up paying for that? Well, it's you and me.
Medlock says development of renewable sources of energy makes sense ultimately because fossil fuels cannot last forever, but he thinks government should take a different approach.
If we were to target funds at R&D, basic research and development, rather than implementation of a technology that's not quite there yet, I think in the long run we'll be much more successful.
In the coming decades of transition, Medlock says the United States likely will rely on abundant natural gas that burns 50% cleaner than coal, but he says rapid advances in the effectiveness of solar energy could shorten the time frame.
At some point it becomes commercially competitive, and at some point when that happens, we don't need policy to pick solar versus something else, because solar will win out.
Medlock and other experts say there's also one big alternative to both fossil fuels and the renewables, and that's conservation of energy through more efficient vehicles, better construction of homes and office buildings, and better methods of monitoring energy use. Greg Flakus, VOA News, Houston.